just waiting for Instagram. They take forever. All right, we are live. Welcome back to After Action Project. This is episode 98, part 2 of our roundtable discussion. We have Dan Brady, Memphis Beach, Tyler, they're all rejoining us. And then we have Riley, who you guys might recognize and remember from one of our earlier podcast episodes. Tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by Locked In Grip. Have you ever lost that perfect grip after shooting multiple rounds, or had your sweaty grip diminish the ability to hang onto your firearm in different weather conditions? Locked In Grip is the solution for you. It's a grip enhancer that keeps your hands free of moisture to create a slip-free connection to the action of your shooting firearm. Locked In Grip liquid shooting sports chalk is made for shooters by shooters. That's brought to you by the folks over there, the good folks over there at the Complete Combatant. Check them out at lockedingrip.com. Our other show sponsor is the Range Buddy app. It's a collection of over 160 shooting drills that are all sorted by the required target type and filterable by the skills that you want to work on. You can have it surprise you with by randomly choosing a drill. There's integrated leaderboards and all that good stuff. If you haven't checked it out, that's available on Android and iOS Range Buddy app. So check that out. But let's get into what everybody is here for. That is our roundtable discussion. We're going to pick up about where we left off a few weeks ago, and we're going to be talking specifically about developing a nice training regimen, how to structure your practices, and then kind of see where the conversation takes us. Your hosts tonight are Andy and myself, self-proclaimed worst podcast host in the history of podcasting. Only thing I fumbled more than words was football in high school. And so let's kick it off there. Riley, reintroduce yourself to our listeners. Talk to us a little bit about concealedcarry.com and what got you into the firearms training industry.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'm sorry I missed part 1 of this. I think I was on the road traveling. But yes, I'm Riley Bowman, second in command at concealedcarry.com. Our goal is to be the #1 resource online for concealed carry information, education, training, and products and other concealed carry resources. Been doing that full time for 8 years now, and through that we've built up or started or created or represent a number of other brands, many of which some of your listeners or viewers may recognize, such as KSG Army Holsters, Barrel Block, Mountain Medical for trauma kit supplies and kits. EDC Belt Company is actually one of our brands we represent now, and actually we distribute their products for them now. So that's not even everything. Range Tech Shot Timers, that'd be another one. My personal background, I got started really in this because I decided to become a reserve cop once upon a time. Going through that process, went through the academy, just started pursuing other opportunities to get training and to become an instructor myself, became an agency instructor, became an NRA instructor, and just one thing led to another thing. Got into competitive shooting back in 2016, started 3-gun, then transitioned full-time into USPSA. As far as I don't touch the 3-gun competitions currently anymore. Probably we'll get into that again at some point. We'll see. But yeah, USPSA masterclass shooter. Try to shoot all the major matches that I can each year, including a couple of national championships. And then I, take my show on the road a couple times a year and teach some classes. So you can find all that at RileyBowman.com. That's where, if you want to connect with me, that's the place to do it. So there you go. I tried to make it as short and sweet as possible. That's the intro.
And really, concealedcarry.com, anything concealed carry related, you can find there. It's a vast wealth of knowledge, and it's all available. I mean, aside from the products, but the information and the knowledge that you guys are sharing on there is it's quite the library, and it's definitely a resource that if you haven't checked out, you should get over there and check it out. That's concealedcarry.com. And then RileyBowman.com for all of your firearms training courses. I'm looking forward to taking your Pistol IQ course here as soon as Andy drags my butt up to wherever the heck we're going to find you.
Yeah, totally.
So
I,
let's.
I do hope to have one in Colorado scheduled at some point here. Come on up from New Mexico, the land of enchantment.
Entrapment. You almost entrapment.
Entrapment.
Although every state, I grew up in Florida. I lived in, Iowa and a couple other, states that I won't mention just because, they're not worth mentioning. But every place is like come on vacation, leave on probation, that kind of deal.
Right.
Although that is very true here in New Mexico. So let's go around the horn. Just briefly reintroduce yourself. Dan, talk to us. Where can our listeners find more information about you?
Dan Brady, Apache Solutions. You can find us at ApacheNC.com. I'm also pretty heavily involved with the Deliberate Training Group V2 on Facebook. Pretty active there. And that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Memphis, you're up on the hot seat.
So, just like Dan, Marine Corps veteran, Semper Fi, competitive shooter. I teach out of Top Gun Memphis, and I also am the owner of Memphis Beach Coaching. Got some classes coming up. You can find me at memphisbeach.com, and you can find Top Guns classes at topgunmemphis.com.
And then Tyler, go ahead and talk to us a little bit about your background in the firearms training industry and what got you here.
Hey, thanks. So yeah, like Riley, I missed out on the first episode there. Had some family business. Let's see. I own and operate Synergy Training Group. It used to be called Synergy Shooting Solutions, but I refined my mission last year. And now that I'm doing more than just shooting training, I decided that Synergy Training Group and a total rebranding was in order. And it's been pretty good ever since. I am diving off into being a traveling instructor, much like the rest of y'all, right? Well, the ones that do it. And actually, Dan, I'll be up in North Carolina. Let's see, August, I think. Gil Narvaez. I can't remember. Is hosting
Gil
me up there.
Narvaez.
Thank
Gil
you.
Narvaez. Yeah, Gil and me are tight, dude. Like,
yeah. Awesome.
Gil's
So I have to
awesome.
catch up with you when I come up that way, man.
Gil's good
August.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. He was one of the first dudes to win a pudding patch on the socials. So anyway, let's see. Got into shooting. Believe it or not, I've grew up as a typical redneck hunting and fishing, but as far as what my relevant shooting experience comes from, my dad died back in 2009. And so as an outlet, my mom and I picked up competitive shooting, specifically USPSA. And she took off and ran with it. I was a typical early 20-year-old boy that did, all the things. And so I'm finally getting my way back around in the past few years and getting my head out of my rear end and taking this for real now. So anyway, like I said, I own and operate Synergy Training Group, and you can find me at synergyshooting.com, Synergy Training Group on the YouTube, socials, all that stuff, Deliberate Training Group like the rest of these guys. And yeah, just trying to travel around and train, teach more.
Does your mom still train? She still compete?
Do I?
Does your mom?
Oh, no, unfortunately not. She had some really bad back injuries when she was a cop and undercover narc agent for the state. And it just got to be, unfortunately, too much for her. She still teaches, believe it or not. She was our state's first well-armed woman, and she was actually our USPSA state coordinator at one point. But so, no, the only thing she does now is pretty much teach and kind of lay low. Her injuries pretty much hold her back from all that.
It was the Deliberate Training Group V2 was mentioned a couple times in the introductions. And one of the coolest things for me to kind of sit back and observe is the amount of progress that some of those folks are making in there. And then the really only thing that kind of tops that in my mind is the amount of advice and coaching and direction that is both well informed and well intentioned, that is just freely given out in that group. And I kind of want to talk, I would like each of you guys to talk about where your shooting journey began as far as your skills and abilities, because I think people get hung up on this idea when they see the end result, right? Like they're seeing these sub-second Instagram draw to first shots, and they don't see the the 50 bad takes or whatever for it. So the only thing that we're seeing is just these high level skills being demonstrated, and there isn't much conversation about where that person started. Right. So if we look at our 4 guests tonight, you guys are all top level, very highly competent and highly qualified shooters. And where did that begin for you? Riley, I want to kick it to you, and then we'll go to Tyler, and then we'll finish up with Memphis and Dan. So, and feel free to pepper in as much of the information about the hard work that went into it, or not. I mean, hey, maybe you're just naturally gifted.
Well, first of all, I don't personally really believe in naturally giftedness per se. I mean, there's definitely shooters that have certain backgrounds, maybe certain body types or builds, various characteristics that probably make some things easier for sure. I mean, I'm a fairly large mammal, so is Dan Brady there. Size definitely and weight definitely helps with managing stuff like recoil and stuff, right? But I'm a huge believer that people can achieve what they put their minds to, what they actually really dedicate themselves to and work on. So, I mean, because I've just seen it demonstrated so many times. I mean, you might have some disadvantages maybe compared to another person that you have to overcome, but with respect to shooting, I mean, I've seen like barely 5 foot tall, like 90-pound women run pistols really, really well, and then of course full size mammals like Dan Brady. So, if you're using good technique and you understand what you're doing and you practice and put in all in the work, I mean, you can do it really well. So, for me, I was just thinking back in my own background. There's a lot of stuff there. I grew up shooting, so that certainly I think helped in a lot of respects. But there's a lot of bad habits I had to overcome once I started, figuring out the way and the light, But it certainly helped because I was comfortable around firearms. But for me, I remember when I started teaching, especially when I started sort of growing myself as an instructor. I remember at one point just sort of looking at myself as a shooter and as an instructor, as a teacher, what I'm able to do, what I know, what I understand. And I was teaching some classes that were, some basic pistol type classes, some defensive pistol type classes, things that you would kind of expect to find at just about any other range across the country on any given weekend. And I thought I did a pretty good job, but I had made the decision personally to step away from teaching tactics so much, and to dedicate myself to the craft of shooting a pistol. Partly because I look around the industry. I mean, I've got a little bit of cop experience, but nothing like what say Dan Brady has, or a whole bunch of other guys, or guys that come back from doing tours overseas and fighting real bad guys. And so I just said, you know what, there's a lot of guys out there that can teach tactics and all of that way better than I can, that certainly have the backgrounds that support that. So why don't I dedicate myself to becoming as good with a pistol as I can? So that's actually when I made the switch into not even shooting 3-gun so much, but shooting USPSA entirely, or solely, because I wanted to purely focus on shooting the pistol. Not that I'm ruling out ever even teaching things that are maybe rifle or carbine related, because I certainly can run a rifle really well. I've done it. But right now the focus is, yes, concealed carry, but it's bigger than that, because shooting is shooting, whether you are concealed carry focused, defensive focused, LE, military. I want to be able to teach people how to shoot with a pistol really, really well. And so then the next natural choice was, well, where do I go that sort of continues? I think I already had some credentials, but it's like, where do I go that continues to advance those credentials or that authority, if you will, on what I teach? And so I decided, okay, I got to go get as good as I can be in what I perceive as being probably the top pistol shooting game, period. No offense, Memphis, to IDPA, but he knows what I mean. I mean, the fastest guys running pistols on planet Earth in an action or practical type shooting sport are in USPSA. So that's where I went, and it's done wonders for me in pursuing those goals of mine. And so, and I'm not done yet either, but that's that. I mean, to answer your question as best as I can, assuming I understood your question correctly, that's kind of how I got to where I am. There's a lot of work that is involved in that for sure. I'm happy to expound upon that, but I think that this should suffice for right now.
Nice. That's great. And Tyler, I know you've talked about your kind of upbringing in the shooting industry, and that kind of started off from a competitive standpoint with a father in law enforcement. Where would you say and you also have a brain for teaching and coaching, and you were a tutor at a young age, and not just like it was like a highly skilled field that you were tutoring, basically like your peers in. So how do you think that played in? Yeah. Math and an instrument too, right? Like you're a saxophone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So maybe that helps with your finger dexterity and all that good stuff. But how would you say that? What kind of advantage did that give you in the shooting industry? And is that something that would be, I guess, for somebody that doesn't have that, how big of a disadvantage would it be for them, and how do they get to a point where, hey, that's no longer relevant?
So the guy my mom started talking to, and we've bumped into him and found him in USPSA as our outlet back in 2011. Is Rodney May, OG Team SIG with Max Michelle, national level GM, many time winner type of dude, and he had his own range in Vicksburg, which is what the range we referenced earlier. This is where I'm from, actually, sort of north of Vicksburg, but Vicksburg in general. And so, believe it or not, he was a SWAT, Alphabet Soup, NSW, 3rd, 5th, and 7th group tactics instructor, mostly CQB stuff. He just used USPSA because he liked to go fast and, I guess, beat other people in a not shoot house scenario. But that's more defining of where I started. As far as being a tutor and a saxophone player, musician, now, while I never did it at a high level, I put everything I had into it with what I had. I'm in Mississippi, Vicksburg, Mississippi at that, like a very low income state with very limited resources. So when I say I was a math tutor and saxophone tutor, don't start thinking like Albert Einstein mixed with Barry Manilow. Not Barry Manilow. Oh crap, that was the wrong reference. Crap. Who's the
That's hilarious.
Who's the famous white guy that plays the soprano sax? Crap.
Kenny G.
Oh yeah, Kenny G. Right?
Kenny G. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So don't think I'm some Albert Einstein, Kenny G. Mutant thing. I just helped out the community that I had, man. The people that I could have an impact with and help, people that were struggling to pass just the required math classes that we had in high school. So that would have been transition to algebra, and geometry. Those are the three that you had to pass to even graduate high school. And then people that were struggling on the ACT, and then saxophone players that were just not quite getting it, that needed some help. Those were the people that I was helping. I wasn't making decent players or decent math people great math or saxophone players. I was helping the people that were struggling find some sort of success and be able to breathe easier, getting by with what they had. So meeting people where they are and helping them where exactly they are is where I really started. Now, as far as that helping me today, it helps greatly because I've done so much in life of helping and leading and motivating other people, just the people that I can be in front of and actually have an impact on. Never really did the social media stuff, like tried to get famous on social media or anything like that. So I don't have like a broad net by any means. I just help the people that I can get in front of. Now, if we bar all the nonsense that I did in my 20s and all the wasted time that I did doing just, whatever, and just skip to right now, I think it helps greatly. I think it really does. But I had to mature to a point to really understand it and apply it the way I do now. Up until about 3 years ago, I didn't realize what I had or what I could have done. Mental health trauma type of things that I was dealing with that I finally didn't let go of until about 3 to 4 years ago, that allowed me to mature and really enjoy life where I'm at, enjoy the God-giving talents that I do have. Now, and I know Riley would agree with me, and I'll give like a little bit of little adage, I guess, if you will, of what he said. Now, while everyone doesn't necessarily have given talent, I do wholly believe in a God-given journey. So God qualifies who He calls. He doesn't call the qualified. Right. So I fully believe that God has called me and qualified me to do this very thing. If you had asked me that question or how I felt about it 3 or 4 years ago, I'd probably just like, whatever. I'm just some dude that kind of enjoys this thing, blah, 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 blah. But thank God I've finally matured and listened to him and got on his path on his time and finally accepted that, which that didn't happen until recently anyway, in the past year or so. But anyway, I say all that to say this to answer your question. It wholeheartedly helped, 100% helped, but I had to understand it. I had to mature to a point to understand how it helps. As far as someone else that doesn't have that sort of background, it doesn't make a dang. Like whatever your background is can be relevant if you are mature enough to understand how it's relevant and use it to your betterment and not use it as an excuse or a crutch or anything else like I did up until about 4 or 5 years ago.
That makes sense. And talking about, kind of leading into that idea, right, where it's, hey, we're here to improve people and better people. I think that kicks it off to Memphis. And Memphis, you said you had a background in the military. Talk to us a little bit about what that looked like, man, coming into the military. Is in, Dan Brady, with your background in law enforcement, I think we'll be able to segue into that. And what was your shooting ability like when you enlisted, and how has it progressed to where you're at today?
Yeah, so before the Marine Corps, I had zero experience with handguns or firearms or anything like that. Even though my mom was Army and my brother was Navy, and then later on found out that my dad was Army. He was National Guard. I also have like 2 other Marines and a bunch of other sailors and soldiers in the family. So we're a military family, but we very rarely went out shooting. We didn't have any guns in the house that I knew of. I found out later that they were, but sure enough, I didn't have any training until I got into the Marine Corps. So that was the way they taught me, and I found out much later, like even after I got out, that that was, I'm not going to say substandard, I'm not going to say insufficient, but there was a lot to be desired. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot that could have been improved upon. And we're seeing that now in the way the Marine Corps is revamping the marksmanship program to where you're actually training guys in the same skills and the same methodologies and the same tactics that they're going to have to use actually in the field. In the Marine Corps, I was a 5th award expert, and 8 out of the 9, no, wait. I take that back. 8 out of the 9 years I was an expert. I was a rifle expert. The thing is, though, it's that course of fire is pretty simple, and it takes very, very little training and very, very little proficiency in order for you to pass it. So what I ended up learning much later was that there was a lot of mental management that went into that I wasn't really able to quantify. I wasn't able to identify at the time. It almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I thought of myself as a good shooter, and thus I became a good shooter. It wasn't until after I left the Marine Corps that, and I started learning much, much, much more, that, I was able to apply those lessons that I learned, but not really directly. You know what I mean? Like, there were intangibles. There was toughness. There was, there were things like that that really translated more than the actual sights and trigger press. So, does that answer your question? Was there more that? Yeah.
No, absolutely. That answers the question. And I kind of want to kick it over to that same kind of format to Dan. Is what was your background and your shooting abilities? What did that look like coming into the law enforcement academy, and kind of how have you progressed to where you're at today?
Well, leaving the Marine Corps as a 4 award rifle expert, and I think I pistol qualled 3 or 4 times as well, and the instruction back in the late 90s, early 2000s was extremely rudimentary as compared to now. The Marine Corps itself usually lacks behind the Army between 15 and 20 years in terms of advancing technology, in terms of advancing instructional methodology. That is pretty par for the course historically, and is still the case today. The Marine Corps is finally getting a hold of shooting intramural matches in action pistol and action rifle, much like the Army Marksmanship Unit has been doing for about 25 years. So the Marine Corps finally got a hold of that, which is great. Just had the MIC matches on Camp Lejeune last week before. A couple of my buddies that I shoot with locally did really well, which is excellent. But in leaving the Marine Corps, going into law enforcement, I thought that I knew a lot more than I did, and I had to get my attention gathered by somebody who had significantly more skill at arms than I did, which he managed to do. And what that ended up doing is making me, as a young 20-odd-year-old dude, realize that in order to advance, I have to take my ego and put it aside. I have to do that. I can think of myself, like Memphis said, I can think of myself as a good shooter and try to manifest that, right? But I have to stop thinking that I know all there is to know about this subject, and I have to open my ears and observe these people who do this at an absolutely incredible level and learn from them. And that's what I ended up doing. So I, to the best of my ability, shut my mouth, opened my ears, and just routinely got destroyed by these guys who had kind of taken me in. And I slowly but surely learned. I'm nothing if not a slow learner. But what I do take in does get retained, generally speaking. One of the things that I kind of want to touch on that Riley talked about is talent and hard work. And this has been talked about by a number of guys. Tim Herron has talked about it frequently, that people throw at him, oh, you got all this talent. You got all this talent. Like he didn't put in thousands of hours of hard work to get to where he is. The guy is a working machine. Nobody works harder than that guy. And he'll tell you, you're not going to outwork me. But what I do think that gets overlooked sometimes is aptitude. Some people just have either physical or mental aptitudes for certain tasks. If that was not the case, then every basketball player who worked hard would be Michael Jordan or LeBron James. Every golfer would be Tiger Woods. These examples that I'm throwing out there, they're not the only guys who put 10 or 15 or 20,000 hours into practice. There are plenty of people out there who put that kind of time, put that kind of effort in, and sought the best instruction, sought the best coaching that existed. And some people make the PGA Tour and some don't. And I don't think that when you get to that level, it comes down to who's working harder. I think some of it comes down to aptitude as well. There are physical advantages, like Riley said. Riley and I are both, the 6'3", 6'4", 250-pound range. We're fairly large dudes, which makes holding a handgun
Excuse me. Point of order. 235 now.
Oh, good job. Good job.
Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so Riley's 235. I'm working around 250. So anyway, which certainly makes holding a handgun still. But talking with our good friend Chris Bean, doing 1 second concealed magazine exchanges when I have a 76-inch wingspan, I have to go from all the way here to all the way here to all the way here. And when you're 5'5", and a little whippy guy, you are mechanically going to be faster than I am, no matter if our hand speed is equal, or even if I have a little bit more of it. I can't mechanically win that race because I have so much more territory to cover. So there's a disadvantage there. So, and I'm not trying to make that as any kind of excuse, because like I said, it has advantages inherent to it as well. But the way I got to where I am, a lot of it had to do with having good examples of people who are mentoring me, excellent coaching, and slowly but surely chipping away at my completely overgrown and undeserved ego that finally, probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, finally got enough out of the way that I actually started making some strides. And the last thing that I'm going to say about this is one of the hurdles that was very, very, very difficult over the course of time has been that coaching pistol shooting has changed majorly about 3 times since I started this journey. The techniques that were thought to be the best for pistol shooting have changed multiple times since the late 90s. And having to relearn something after you've put 15 or 20,000 reps into it, into a different way, is challenging. You are literally rewiring your brain to do that. And if you rush that process along the way, you set yourself back. So that has been a challenge. And I wrote one more thing down. Oh, Riley said something about tactics. Tactics are completely contextual to the situation at hand. There are broad overviews and ways to approach certain themes and certain situations, but as we all know, the guys who say tactics, a lot of those guys are really just trying to cover for not being good shooters. Running a pistol is running a pistol is running a pistol, and if you can run a pistol at a very, very high level, applying the tactics that are required at that given point in time, whether it's in the local stop and rob or in your living room or in the food court of a mall, it's going to be kind of self-explanatory at that moment.
Kind of a theme that's kind of weaving its way through the responses is the work, right? It's there's some natural ability, there's going to be some of the aptitude there, but at the end of the day, everybody has to put the work in. And I think I kind of want to get you guys' thoughts on what the work should be, or what does the work look like for somebody who's maybe taken a class or two, right? It's the person in the deliberate training group V2 that it's something switched, and they're like, I'm going to actually start allocating some time and energy to becoming a better shooter. And then, I just want to give everybody 30 to 45 seconds. We'll put a 45-second, I'll just, make up 45 seconds. But what should it look like for that specific shooter? Not necessarily what it looks like for you, but if you had to say, hey, this is going to be the low-hanging fruit that you could tackle on a regular basis, what does that work look like? And let's start with Tyler.
It needs to look smart. It needs to be defined. It needs to be simple, and it needs to be attentive. Like you need to be attentive to it. You need to have proper intent, and it, again, it needs to be well defined. You can't just throw a bunch of crap at a wall hoping for something to stick. And man, I wish I could tell myself this many years ago. I don't know if I'd have listened, but something I learned over the years just from, reading different things, taking a Steve Anderson class, pulling my knowledge from tutoring and academia, really understanding how our brain absorbs information, is allowed to actually retain it and then utilize it. What I've learned is, and I'm still a little in the theory area, I'm still working through proving it, and it seems to be proving pretty well through my sample size so far, is that we need to be breaking down our practices further than what we do. Until you get to a certain point, I would say, like once you start getting to like mid, high level A class, it starts to look a little different. And for anyone listening, don't know, I just said mid to high level A class is in USPSA. So A class is just under master, and master is just under grandmaster. So those are like the top 3 tiers of best shooters. And then you have B, C, D, and unclassified underneath that. Anyway, so if we're just talking about pistol for now, and we are, and it could be carried over to rifle. I want to examine that more in the future, but I really think we need to be breaking down our practice into 3 different modes, or 4 if you are a competitor or some sort of tactician where movement is a big thing. That's your 4th one. But I really think in our dry fire and our live fire, we need to be specifically attacking speed or accuracy or performance or movement. And I with the rudimentary understanding of how the brain learns, absorbs, and retains and is able to execute information, we need to only stick to one of those 4 per sleep cycle. So you can also, I don't know if y'all know this, but my mom was also a competitive bodybuilder. And I went to the gym with her freaking all the time, and we were trained by another professional award-winning bodybuilder. And so I have a lot of knowledge behind how we train for that. And man, does it carry over into this too a lot. Anyway, so it would be like going to the gym and be like, you know what? I'm going to do squats, leg presses, bench presses, lat pull downs, shrugs, tricep extensions, bicep curls, all in one day. Well, you're going to get a whole lot of nothing done. Honestly, you're just going to leave tired, and all your whole body's going to be confused. And you're like, oh, this sucks. Your cortisol levels are going to be through the freaking roof. You're going to start burning sugar, and it's not good. Your body just doesn't receive that well at all. But if you go in with a specific plan, you isolate 3 to 5 muscle groups, depending where you are in your phase of bodybuilding, and you just stick to that, and then you leave. And you're allowed to change that through a sleep cycle. So like the next day you can go attack different things. so on, so forth. But anyway, I say all that, say this. I feel like we should start looking at our practice the same way. Not just looking at, but try it out. And, you know, what do you have to lose if you try this method for 6 weeks? In the grand scheme of your life, 6 weeks ain't gonna really change much. It definitely ain't gonna make you any worse. But if you start seeing significant tangible improvements in that 6 weeks utilizing that methodology, well, there you go. You're on to something.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Tyler. Another thing I learned too, and of course, again, credit to Tim. I took his Train for Mastery course, and that's tracking progress. I never do that, or I never did that. I'd go out and I'd say, all right, I'm going to practice draw the first shot today. Next time, I'm going to practice transitions. And then I never really put anything on paper to where the next time I go to do it again, I can't compare anything to, am I actually getting better? Am I getting faster? I don't even know, you know? So I think it's really important to actually put that on paper and track your times, track your progress, I should say, not track your times. What's your thoughts on that, Memphis?
So as far as practice methodologies, so can we repeat the original question, please? I want to make sure that I'm not going off track.
Yeah, just what is
45 seconds, which is like a sixth of what Tyler had. So
yeah, just a quick rundown of what the work should look like for somebody who's just starting to take their improvement in the realm of handgun shooting seriously. What should that look like for them?
It should look a lot simpler than what they're making it. It should look a whole lot more, more just not really so much about like the grip, sights, trigger, not really so much focusing on like making really, really small holes and really, really small targets. Really more about where you want to go and how you want to get there. A lot of that work's going to happen upstairs, and a lot of it's going to be emotional, because there's two really big problems that I typically see in the shooting world is that people don't wander far enough outside of their comfort zone. And then also people wander so far out of the comfort zone that it crushes their spirit. And they never really find that sweet spot of arousal that, that Brian Hill keeps talking about. Like, the reason why we keep making references to USPSA classifications is because it's honest. There's no room for lying to yourself about it. If I'm a D class, I'm going to have to swallow my pride. I'm going to have to accept the fact that I'm a D class. And if I want to get to a C class, then I got to start doing C class stuff. I got to start understanding where my sights are when I press the trigger. I got to start calling my shots. I got to start looking at my movement. I got to start doing stuff. But a lot of that, really, 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 most of that is like once you start getting into the realm that's where you want to be, not really so much as far as classes, but in the point that you have an idea of where you want to be. Not really just so much like the whole vagary of, I just want to be a good shooter. I want to get better. What the hell does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, how about we make a goal that's a little bit more specific? And then, we start taking steps towards that goal in a way that's attainable and in a way that, that's realistic. So as far as practice goes, practicing stuff that you suck at is going to be a really, really big thing there. And then also accepting that correction without emotion. Like the fact that, hey, this is going to suck, but hey, let's just see where we are, right? Let's make some honest assessments about it. And then let's make a game plan of where to go from there. And if you don't know what that looks like, then that's where you get some of the guys in this panel and some of the guys in the deliberate training group and some of the guys that, like you actually get an actual instructor that knows what he's doing, some instructors that you've seen help other guys, like get some of that feedback from those guys and, make an actionable plan. I'm sick and tired of people just wanting to be a better shooter. Tell me what that looks like, and if you don't know what that looks like, I got some ideas.
Andy also had a question, and I think I completely skipped over that. Andy, did I? But I want Andy to kick that question to the group after we get Dan and Riley. Get your guys' thoughts on what does that work look like for students? And then let's
Yeah, go
Dan,
ahead.
you went last time, so let's get you going here. Dan, what are your thoughts on what that work looks like?
All right, so it specific to your suggestion of, this is somebody who's just starting out and I'm going to take this seriously. I got a process, an exact process for those people. Number one, take Memphis Beach's Dry Fire webinar online. It's cheap. It's 100% worth it. I don't care how good you are. It's 100% worth it. That's the first thing you need to do. Read Steve Anderson's Refinement and Repetition. Have that on your nightstand. Read it with a highlighter and a pen, and just have that there. And then get some one-on-one coaching. Like, what is, go do some live fire video stuff, do some dry fire video stuff, and then get some one-on-one coaching from somebody who knows what they're talking about. There are several people here. Tyler Tharp is one of them. Memphis Beach is one of them. I'd like to think that I'm one of them, who offer quality coaching via the internet. It's incredibly dollar for dollar valuable, and you don't even have to leave your own home. Video record your dry fire and get that coaching. Video record your live fire and get that coaching. Track your progress. Shoot some competitions. I don't care if they're IDPA, Steel Challenge, USPSA. Just go shoot and see where you fall apart. And then revisit those first 4 steps, and then take 1 or 2, not more than that, quality weekend-long classes annually from the list of awesome instructors who are out there. Wait for somebody who's a national guy or gal who's coming in your area so that you minimize travel and all the related expenses to that. And take 1 or 2 classes a year and then start over again and just go through that process. And you could do that feasibly for about 2 years, and you're gonna, even if that's all you do, you will land USPS A class ish. And I mean, feel free to disagree with me if you want, guys, but I think if you do that process and you take it at least somewhat seriously, you could land an A class USPSA pretty easily.
Makes sense. And Riley, let's round that out with your thoughts.
So the first thing is that the work is far more important that it's consistent and consistently done than the amount that's perhaps done. And by that, I mean, I've said this in probably every class I've ever taught. I can pretty much guarantee if you just, I know this is true if you just do 10 minutes a day, but honestly, I think if you did 5 minutes a day, every day, just 5 minutes of deliberate, intentional, effective, dry practice, in a month's time, you'll be already a different looking shooter. And so that's the first thing I want to emphasize is that every day, 5, maybe 10 minutes. If you want to do more than that, fine, but I'll tell you, a lot of people, as soon as you start getting more than about 5 minutes, it's like, oh, well, I've got all these other things to do. So just do 5 minutes a day and do it every day, and it'll make a huge difference. Now, what should you do? I think the simplest place to start is working on draw, because and presentation. So that's all part of the same thing. I mean, it's something I practice pretty much every day. Every day, I do practice draws with few exceptions every day. And there's a lot of other dry fire I do too. But like, people want to know, how do I get up on target and put rounds consistently in, say, an A zone or whatever your chosen target area is, in a very fast, period of time? Well, that's how you do it. You do the consistent work every day, and because you need to establish a consistent grip every time from the holster, and you need to take the same consistent path from that holster up to your eye line and you need to have that gun indexed properly so that the sights are just there. And that's going to come from 5 minutes a day, every day. There's a lot of other things that you should practice too, but like that's the simplest place to start. And you'd be surprised how few people actually do that. So I'm going to leave it at that. We can go way deeper, but I'd really love those watching or listening to just do 5 minutes a day. And if you just want to do draw practice, and by that, like you should do the whole draw. You should also micro drill different portions of that draw. Do that 5 minutes a day, and it's going to make a huge difference. And if you're further along than that, like if you already feel like you've got that down pretty well, then hit me up, or Tyler or Dan or Memphis or whoever, and like we'll go to the next step.
And real quick before Andy kicks it off to the next question, we're talking about Facebook groups. If you guys are not part of the Deliberate Training Group V2, join that. If you're not part of the ASP Dry Fire Training Group, join that. This month, they're getting ready to give away a one of the Ace XR. I don't know if you guys saw that in the ASP Dry Fire group, but it's super simple. I think you just have to dry fire once. And there's like 1 or 2 other things that you have to do, and they're going to be giving away one of these units to a member in that group. So that's the ASP Dry Fire Training Group. So those are 2 great groups, probably 2 of the best groups that I'm part of right now, outside of alumni specific groups. So check those out. But Andy, I know you had a great question for Memphis. I want to, if you don't want to mind, kick that around to the rest of the group.
Sure. So I wanted to add on to what Riley was saying there as far as dry fire. There's a few other tips with that too. And I don't know who mentioned it earlier, but taking Memphis's online dry fire training, everybody says dry fire, practice to draw, right? Practice to draw to one shot. If I'm new and I'm not understanding it, how do I do it? How do I dry fire? How do I draw to one shot? Am I making progress? Is my draw what I think good? Is it really good? Is there some things that are failing? That's the challenge that some people need to address in the beginning before even getting started. And that starts with humility too. I'll give you a great example. I posted my draw to first shot the other day in the V2 page. First thing, like I think 3 people said, Andy, look at your gun back in your holster. And I'm like, shit, I know how to do that. I do it all the time. How come I'm not doing it now? And it's those little habit changes, which I'm going to move into the last thing, and I'll ask my question. In your progress, be prepared to accept change regularly. In the very beginning, Jeremy knows this, I had a really big problem with low left right-hand shooter, but it's because my right ring finger doesn't bend. My first distal joint doesn't bend, and it caused me pain anytime I grip the gun tight enough. So many classes. Finally, Tim Herron worked with me on getting a grip that actually established for me. It works great. I just took a Scott Jedlinski red dot course with AJ Zito, and drawing from distance, I started becoming inconsistent. And AJ was like, "Hey, Andy, you're gripping too hard." And I'm like, "Wait, what? I could never grip hard enough. Now you're telling me I'm gripping too hard?" He's like, "Yeah, you need to back off a little bit." And I'm like, that's the first time somebody's told me that in about 5 years. So understand that through your progress, things that you think you have down on lock, it may change. There's some consistencies that Riley could probably say. As he mentioned, you got to have a consistent grip all the time. But as you work on your consistent grip and you change something else, something in your grip might need to be changed again. So just a little thought process. This is a journey. This is not a trip. And understand that things are going to have to change. You have to have some humility, and be afraid to accept, no matter how good you think you are, there's someone that's better than you, and there's someone that can help you. So just think of that. So my question is, I guess my question / comment, and I'll start with you again, Memphis, is how do you track that progress? How do you know that you're getting better or you're shooting faster, other than taking a USPSA class? Because like for me, I'm not very competitive. I like to go shoot USPSA, but forever I didn't really care if I was first or last. I just want to go do it because it's fun. And then I realized with that attitude, I'm never going to get better. So I had to force myself to become somewhat competitive to start moving myself up in the ranks. So how do we track progress? How do we get better? Memphis,
you know,
that's
to
for you.
steal a line from Tyler, I'm glad you asked it. So I'm going to answer this in two ways. The first one being technical, and then the second one being a little bit more emotional. The technical way is, you know, consistency, just like Riley was saying earlier. Not just consistent fire, but also consistency in your dry fire. So a lot of times with a lot of my clients, if they're first starting off, we take some baselines. We'll do something like a bill drill or the points at face value divided by time. And we can actually use that as a baseline. And points divided by time is one of those metrics that we can use on just about any drill, like a bill drill or 5 shots to a B8 or, you know, 5 shots to a playing card or whatever have you. And, you know, you can have that without an upper limit. You know what I mean? You're never going to get 100% on that drill. You know what I mean? Because you can always get faster. You can always be more accurate. You can always, you know, refine something. So keeping that consistency is going to keep a journal and it doesn't have to be a written journal to where I'm getting my book, my diary, and I'm writing stuff down in it. No, it could be a video log. You know, a voice recording that you leave yourself. It can be, you know, something that allows you to write down your thoughts about that drill. Like the first time you have the drill, it could be something like, okay, I'm a little nervous because I never shot this before. And then the 10th time you do the drill, it's like, I'm not really so much nervous. I'm just anxious because I want to get better. I want to set another PR. And you can look back at that and you can track how you felt about it on an emotional level and say, okay, I'm a lot more confident in my shooting than I was 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago. And so you can use that to make some technical changes that can breed more. Maybe once you hit a plateau with, let's just go back to our original example. How about 5 shots in a B8, points divided by time? Or okay, if that's easy for you and there's a plateau there, you can shrink it down to a playing target. It just depends on where you are emotionally and where you are as far as your competency. So, like keeping a journal, keeping interest there.
Memphis, we had some, I think, some connection issues on my end, and I don't know if that was the same for our listeners and viewers, but I feel like you were talking about just using a video journal or a journal on paper or voice memos, and I know you've talked about it in the past, where something that you can quickly look back on and reference. You know, is there, you know, did I miss anything with that?
Mess with connectivity, but you know, I wouldn't overcomplicate the actual logging there. As a matter of fact, the Range Buddy app ends up, as far as concerned, I wouldn't really use I think there's a note section for the drills that you put in, and so I wouldn't really so much use it for the I wouldn't really use it so much for the technical aspects. I would just use it for how I felt and how I see myself. What is my own self-concept? So I would use it. Let's see. I'm going to switch to low definition. There we go.
Yeah, that might help with the connectivity issues.
Fantastic. And hopefully that fixed me.
Yeah, it might be me. We'll see as we kind of kick it around through the rest of the guests. It might be my internet connection slowing things down. Andy, who did you want to kick it off to next? Talking about tracking progress.
Let's just move over to Dan, and we'll go to Riley, and then go to the next question.
All right, so tracking progress. Memphis will remember back in his Marine Corps days, we had these things we call green monsters, and It's a notebook like what Tyler just kind of held up, right? It's a bound green book. It looks like a duty log book. You see one on every duty NCO's desk anywhere in the Marine Corps. And I got a fat stack of these things, and I literally write down my dry fire practices, my live fire practices. I log how much ammo goes through my guns. Um, I'm going to offer a little word of caution when it comes to how I felt about stuff versus the technical. Um, if you don't know where you are as a shooter from a very technical standpoint, be extremely cautious about how good you felt about a given thing, because human beings are terrible at identifying what was quality and what was speed based solely on feeling, which is why shot timers exist. That felt like a really good rep, and then you look at the shot timer and be like, wow, that was actually garbage. Where did I go wrong? Which is why video is a really good friend of ours for our own sessions. But tracking progress over time is super important to understand where we are. Andy, you'll notice from Tim Herron's class, tracking a specific drill over time, where you are is really an average of your last 3 performances, right? That's the way that Tim looks at it. Honestly, that's kind of the way, in an overly simplified way, that USPSA ranking works, is your progress over time, your scoring over time, how well you do on specific classifiers over time. What percentage are you shooting? So if you track specific drills, if you're not practicing the same drill over and over and over and over and over, you practice a variety of different skills, you will see over the course of time, you look at the front of that book from a year and a half ago, and you say, okay, I did a bill drill. I shot 2 Charlie and 4 Alpha in a 3.15 second time frame. And then a year and some change later, when you're at the back of that book, I look at my bill drill and I shoot it clean pretty consistently at like a 2.1, 2.15 from concealment. You have made a massive amount of progress, and that is identifiable. It is concrete. It is technical, and you should be able to use that technical data to sort of increase your emotional state of how you feel about yourself as a shooter, because you have identifiable, trackable progress that says, I have improved. And if you do that over a variety of different drills that test a variety of different skills, then you'll absolutely be able to say, yes, I have drastically improved. Memphis mentioned the playing card drill that is kind of being kicked about over the course of the last 12, 13, 14 weeks, depending on where you are when you picked it up. I can do the playing card drill very frequently, well under the time. So I decided to start challenging myself and doing it one hand only. Draw and do it weak hand only. If you can do something that was designed as a drill to do with draw and 2 hand, and you can do that with your weak hand only, still under the initial time frame, I would say you have improved as a shooter. There are different ways to look at improvement, and whether that is from a known bar that you can very, very consistently clear. Not only can you clear that bar, you can clear that bar by handicapping yourself as well. You've improved. Tracking that over time is worth it, and it's worth it from a technical standpoint of I can show my progress has improved, and an emotional standpoint of I feel better about myself because the work that I have put in has quantifiable results. Sorry, that was long-winded.
I agree with that too. Again, going back to the Jedi class I just took, that was another point of contention. He talked about a lot of asking you, hey, so what happened there? And the response is, well, I feel like it did this. Well, you feel like it or it did it. You can't have the emotion of feeling like what happened. Tell me what actually happened, or try to attempt to do that so we can work on that progress. So I agree with that. So Riley, what do you got?
I'm going to pick up where Dan ended with that last sentence or two of his, saying something along the lines of, by tracking and knowing where you are, you can feel better about yourself, or something like that. If you don't know what your capabilities and limitations are, it's really hard to have confidence in yourself as a shooter. Confidence comes with knowledge, uh, which comes from you knowing what. I mean, so let me describe it this way. If you know that on any given day, at any given time, in just about any given circumstance, that you can with reasonable expectations fall within a certain range of performance, then depending on the problem you face, like, I mean, if it's a problem that can be solved with this range of performance that you can deliver on demand cold, that you can have great confidence in what it is that you've got to do, because you know you have the skill to do that. uh, I think this is something that is probably underrated and not often talked about enough. But it's kind of like, I mean, for instance, a lot of times we get a little bit hyper focused on the idea of a sub-second draw, right? Like a typical 7-yard A zone hit, one shot draw, sub-second. There's reasons for that, and I'm by the way, I think it's something that's worth pursuing for a lot of people. Maybe not everybody. I mean, depends on what your motivations and personal contexts are, but honestly, it's more achievable for more people than people probably realize, um, especially with good coaching and especially with deliberate, consistent practice. Here's my reason for appreciating the skill of being able to perform a sub-second draw. Because if I can 90% of the time hit a sub-second, say 0.95, 0.9, 0.95, 0.98, whatever, in that range, then it's cakewalk, honestly, to deliver a consistent near 100% performance, like meaning you do it 100% of the time in like 1.15, 1.2. And that's a pretty good place to be, honestly, you know? And you'd be amazed at, like, I mean, you'd be, number one, you'd be amazed at what you can see and actually visually process even at a second or less. But man, when you're at that level, it's amazing what you can see and process. By that, I mean target information, sight information of your gun in 1.2. It feels like I'm falling asleep behind the wheel, you know. But the cool thing is I know I can deliver that 100% of the time, right? That gives me great confidence in being able to deliver that level of performance cold all the time. And how many problems does a skill of of that level solve? A lot of the problems, like probably most of the problems, very easily, right? Now, is there a time that maybe a sub-second is really needed? Yeah, sure, probably. But you see what I'm getting at? So it's really important, I think, to know what your capabilities and your limitations are. To know that, you need to measure it. How do you go about measuring it? And I think this is important to do in both live as well as dry fire. Okay. Because I think you want, I mean, you need both of those metrics. Because one, you're hopefully doing a lot of work in dry fire because number one, it's easy to do. It's low cost, right? You can do it just about anytime, anywhere. Well, you know what I mean? Like it's, you don't have to go to a range to do it, right? You may not be able to do it in your office where you work or something, but maybe you can, like I can in my office. But anyway, so like you need to measure it in dry fire and live fire, and you're going to probably see performance differences between your live fire times and your dry fire times, which is why it's also important to measure both of those. Okay. And one of my goals I have personally as a shooter is to try to narrow that gap between what I can do in dry fire and what I can do in live fire. And that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time at, actually, in my practice, is to, okay, I know what I can do in dry. Let's see if I can do it in live. What's the performance gap there? Can I, and you do the work to try to bring that closer and closer together. At least that's one approach. It's not the only approach. And it's not the only thing I focus on, but it is certainly a big part of it. So then, how do you measure these things? Let's talk about live fire. And I'm going to give some credit to Bill Blowers. I kind of had a similar idea, but I remember seeing a Bill Blowers video on YouTube, and he's talking about measuring data, and I thought it was really, really spot on. And he basically is like, just as a simple example, let's just say it's that classic one-shot draw to the target. Do that 10 times. More is better, but let's just say 10 times, and throw out your best and throw out your worst, and then average everything else out. So let's see, if you got 10 runs, you throw out the best and the worst, you got 8, average them out, and consider that your baseline performance. Like, you have reasonable belief that I can achieve that baseline a high percentage of the time, right? Do that in dry fire too. But how do you measure that in dry fire? First of all, there are some tools we can do that. We can do that with Mantis. We can actually get some actual performance metrics, especially with draw to first shot with the Mantis X system. You could do it with other software like the Laser app, which I've used for years, LASR, Laser Activated Shot Reporter application, because you can also measure very, very accurate shot times in dry fire using that. And there's a few others. But if you don't have that, or you don't care for that, but you have a shot timer, and if you don't have a shot timer, you need to get one, because what we already discussed, you should be measuring metrics in live fire, right? So get a flipping shot timer. So you have a shot timer, right? If you don't know what your baseline is, pick something, okay? Pick 2 seconds, pick 1.5. I don't care. Now, can you get, yeah, thank you, Memphis. He's got a Range Tech Bluetooth shot timer. That's one of ours that we make at concealedcarry.com. It's a simple, low-cost shot timer. Okay, set a part time. And what are you looking for? Beep to beep. And so let's say it's 1.5 seconds. So you hear a beep, you begin your draw. Can you get up on target and see a good sight picture before that second beep and press the trigger? Yes or no? If you don't, okay, move the time back, right? But anyway, you want to get to where you can get a pretty good sense of sort of where your baseline in dry fire is. Okay, and so do it a number of times. And how many times can you consistently get 1.5 or 1.4 or 1.2, whatever the magic number is for you? We're all at different places along the journey. And then the final piece I'll say with respect to working on that kind of stuff in dry fire, and this is, adapted from Steve Anderson. I think it's a very worthwhile approach. And it's not something that, something people have used for a lot of years, but I like taking whatever my dry fire baseline time is, let's say it's 1.2, and add 10% to that. So, say 1.3, 1.35, somewhere in that ballpark. And then I'm going to start my dry fire session. If I'm just working on that draw, let's just say as the example here, you can do this with anything. I'm going to start at let's say 1.4 as a warm up time. And I'll do like 10 reps or 20 reps, depending on how much time I have. I'll do, say, 10 reps at that baseline plus 10% warm up time. Then I'll move it up and I'll do a bunch of reps. Let's say if I did 10 warm up, let's do 20 reps at my baseline time. Cool, great. I should be able to nail that like 99% of the time, because that's my baseline, at least 95% plus. Then what do you want to do? Step it down another 1/10 of a second, and then another 1/10, and another 1/10, and see how far you can go. Because that's where the growth occurs, is by pushing yourself beyond where your baseline is, right? And there's certainly, like, when the stars align and everything's perfect, like, there's gonna be times where you can hit 10% or 20% faster than what your baseline suggests, but you're not gonna be able to do it 100% of the time. But the goal is to get to where that becomes the new baseline, right? And so you're just constantly chopping away at that whatever that current baseline time is, and trying to work your way down. And again, could be done with reloads, could be done with a step and draw, it could be done like whatever it is you want to measure. But you want to measure it, and you want to measure live and dry, and you want to know what those metrics are and the differences between them. And what's going to happen to you as a shooter is you're going to have pretty soon you're going to figure out, it may not happen overnight, but over, several months or whatever, you'll have a pretty good idea about where you are at and what you can do. And that inspires a lot of confidence in your ability, because if you know what you can do, then you have the ability to then stay within those limits. When we see performance failures, particularly like OISs, officer involved shootings, Dan, I'm sure can attest to this. Some of those that I see, to me, what it appears to be is that the officer involved is trying to do something that they don't have the skill set to do, that's above and beyond what they can do, and they don't even probably know it. And so how do they know when and where and how to put the brakes on, or what, to like what's appropriate for a given shot or a given context? Because they don't even know what they can do. But if you know what you can do, then you can operate within those limits. So there you go. Sorry, bit of a monologue, but
No, that's good, Dan. I think you had a follow up there, and then I want to kick it back to Tyler to get his thoughts on tracking progress.
Yeah, the what Riley just brought up about OIS videos that are so pervasive now that they happen, and 3-4 days later, a lot of times where we have access to body cam, cruiser cam, surveillance cam of sometimes multiple angles of the same shooting, for good or bad, whether it's a knife wielding suspect at arm's distance, or an acorn on a cruiser. There's everything involved, but what is lacking in a lot of law enforcement firearms training specifically, it's getting better, but it's not there yet, is performance-based shooting, of understanding that certain actions take certain amounts of time, and what does that relate to the time and distance that the officer, his or herself, needs in order to appropriately be able to respond to those things. The classic example being the Tooler principle, but what is not focused on is the hardwired skills that you need to have access to right now at any given point in your shift, whether you're standing there in front of somebody, or seated in your cruiser, or walking with stuff in your hands. If you don't have access to those skills right now, you are fighting two people. At a minimum, you're fighting two people. You're fighting one suspect and yourself, if you don't have just subconscious access to those skills. And that's what Riley's really getting at with that. If you don't have 10 or 20 draw reps today, you've put yourself behind the power curve. Every time I put my gun belt on, I would draw a minimum of 10 times, minimum, absolute minimum. And a lot of times it was significantly more than that. You should be doing that if you strap a gun on in any way, shape, or form. You should unload it and get some of those draws in. If not, you're just putting yourself behind the power curve. I'll jump off my soapbox. Thanks, Riley.
No, that was good, man. I appreciate you kind of expanding on that. And then, Tyler, let's kick it back to you, man. How are you tracking progress, and what are you looking for in that world?
So full disclosure, this is something I teach in my Synergy Remote class, and help people understand what they should be tracking, how they define it, how they word it. And so I'll be honest with you, man, I don't track my practice stuff. I track my performance, and I let the practice take care of itself. The performance metrics will prove to me what games I'm making in my practice. I've already defined my practice. I know it's going to work. I'm trusting my process, and then my performance numbers will prove that. So that frees up about 1/4 of the things I do that need to be tracked. Now, as far as performance tracking goes and what I write it down, I'm very specific in what I write down. I have a very specific skeleton, if you will, that I also share with people. And I started off with who I am and what I want to be. So my mantra for me, it is I am an up and coming national level instructor, and I will become that person by being a servant to my students. And then I will define something that went really well in my practice. If you'd like before then, you'd like to, you can give yourself a topic. So like today I shot USPSA. And so like, then I would tell myself what I thought I did really well. Every stage I walked up to, I shot it as if it was an on stage without bringing any of the past stage drama or issues, whatever. I try to make sure I don't use any sort of too negative of a word. I was very present. This benefited me greatly. And then after that, I would identify something that I felt needs attention. For some reason, I noticed my left hand did not have a consistent grip throughout the day. I will give that attention throughout my practice. So run back through it real quick. I'm going to write up my mantra because I need to know it and believe it every single time. Your topic, like what you did, something you did really well, and then something you identified that needs attention. And none of that can have any sort of negative self-talk. All right. Now, here's another caveat to all this and more minutia, if you will, of how this should be done. This needs to be done before you go to sleep. You need to relive it before you go to sleep. So write it down the day of. I don't ever really go back and reread it. And you don't really have to. The whole purpose of this is so that you relive what you just did in a way that you choose to relive it, so that we are molding our subconscious mind and building our self-image into what we really want it to be. If we do not, we don't write it down exactly how we want it with that intent, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to relive all those negative things that we thought we did that day, and that's just going to tear us down. Ask me how I know. I don't tell y'all none of this from the mount of peak perfection, all right? I tell you this as the regular Joe that has made these mistakes and suffered the hard way throughout my own journey, and I'm trying to lessen everyone else's learning curve. So that is my little nuance on performance journaling and tracking progress. The other guys have really dialed in all the other awesome bits of it.
Yeah, it's a good one, Tyler. I like that too. It was another thing that I learned a while back. I'd go to a range, or I'd go to a competition, and I would screw up the first stage, and then the second stage, I would take the first stage with the second stage. I'd screw up the second stage, and I'd take those two to the third stage, and on and on and on. And I learned,
too, buddy.
yeah, and I learned you just got to move on and refocus and say, okay, you know what, that was not a great stage. These are some things that I need to improve on. Focus on the grip. Manage your sides, press the trigger, whatever it is. So I like that. Jeremy, how can we use the Range Buddy to assist us in all of these things that we've been talking about in progression and training?
Yeah, the Range Buddy app is there's a simple, super simple tool in the Range Buddy app. Each one of the drills has an integrated training session tracker or practice session tracker. You know, if you're shooting a USPSA drill, it has USPSA scoring built into it, or hit factor scoring built into it, B8s, all that good stuff, and it'll log it for you. So if you wanted to look back and see how you did, and that really came about. I know Andy and I were at the range one day. We were working on build drills, and I think Andy was like, either I commented to Andy that he had a good run, or he commented to me that I had a good run, and I looked at him and I was like, you know, I have no idea if that's better or worse than the last time I worked on build drills. And then, you know, a little light bulb moment. It's like, hey, why don't I build that into this thing that we're working on? So, yeah, man, the Range Buddy app, super simple. You can go in as much detail as you would like, or as little detail as you would like. But for me, it's more so did I do better on this drill than the last time that I shot it? And specifically, did I do better on this drill? Like, I will only log my cold runs, right? So the first build drill that I run, that's the one that I log, because that, for me, in my mind, I think that's a better indication of what my skill set is, as opposed to, hey, let me log all 10 of my runs today and only count the best ones. So yeah, the Range Buddy app is a great tool for that. Oops, sorry about that. I spazzed out. Andy, what I think you had another question or two that you wanted to follow up with on our guests.
Yeah, as usual, I always thank the guests for coming on. We're going to wrap up here soon. I think we've covered a good hour and a half of questions, and you guys have given us great answers. So I want to end my questioning with this. Let's try to do this within 30 words or less, maybe even 20 words. I want to throw a V2 question that I just kind of watched a thread happen regarding red dots, circle versus dot. Okay. Now, guys like Steve Fisher, I've heard him talk about using the circle, right, on a Holosun, for example, and our eyes naturally go to the center of circles. So using that to present that to our target versus using a dot. And what is your quick thoughts on using a dot versus a circle? For me, up close, dot works really, really well. Or I'm sorry, let me back that up. Using the circle on a Holosun works really well for me, right? As I start stepping back into distance, 15, 20, 25 yards, I start losing it because there's too much information in the window for me. So I end up switching back to dot. So what I've typically decided now, I'm just going to stay with the dot. That way I'm not having to make dot circle decisions. So let's just go Dan, Memphis, Riley, and Tyler, and then we'll end out the show.
Okay, so to me first, Andy. Okay. All right. So I don't have a ton of experience with the circle. I've played with it a little bit fairly early in Holosun's adoption of a circle reticule. And I personally don't like it because of that exact reason. There's just too much information there. And for me, it's kind of regardless of what, unless it's a plain USPSA target with, I don't know, 5 or 7 yards where I have zero other information in front of me other than plain cardboard. It just gets to be too much. I just want that pinpoint of light to show up in the thing that I am looking at. So I think some of it comes down to how you process information visually, and also kind of comes down to some visual acuity stuff. I had this conversation with Riley and a couple of the other guys the other day on what is your preferred dot size, and some people like the bigger 5 MOA, 6 MOA. Some of us like the much smaller ones. I think it boils down to visual processing, visual acuity in terms of preference. That's about the shortest I can make that.
Awesome. Memphis?
Can everybody hear me okay? I had some technical issues. All right, right on. Okay, so this might be an unpopular opinion. I think it's gaining some popularity. But I've always looked at the circle and the circle dot as training wheels for just having a dot. I agree with Dan in that, it just comes down to how you process information. The way I process information personally, and also what I've learned from, some other really, really proficient dot shooters, is that we just want to know where our shot is going. And I don't want so much on the screen that it distracts me from all the other stuff that's going on. I just want this little bitty dot, and I want to pick a spot on the target, and I'm going to bring my dot there. And then once my dot's there, I'm going to press off. And that's really as simple as I'm going to keep it.
Nice. One thing I used to do with the circle, and it was when I first started working with a dot, and I didn't quite understand it, to where if I started seeing the circle somewhere in the window, then it's like, oh, that's where my dot is. It's over to the left, so move to the right, and then I would center it. So that's just something that I did. You're talking about training wheels, and I don't know if that's a good way to maybe start training wheels. And then I went to the dot to where once I understood it and learned that my grip leads the way, the dot's there. So anyway, Riley, what's your thoughts?
You said 20 words. Let me try.
I'm not
Big-
counting for the record.
Big circle, too big. Dot, okay. Big dot, better. So
Perfect.
actually, I really like somewhere between 6 to 8 MOA dots personally. Why? Because I run the dot brightness a little bit lower, and it produces a very clean, very readable, crisp dot, which is appealing to my eye. I've also shot a bunch with 2 and 3 MOA dots, and they're fine. I can get the work done. But I like big dots, and I cannot lie. So I have been experimenting with 8 MOA circle, just a circle only, no dot in the middle, just an 8 MOA circle. I actually bought a 407 CO, which is, I don't even know if they make them anymore or not. Holosun from Tyler. I bought it from Tyler, and it's an 8 MOA circle. And I really like it. And the new Holosun 507 comp has something similar, although it's more of like a upside down horseshoe shape. But I perceive it very much the same way. And I'm finding I quite like that 8 MOA circle only. Works really well with what I like. You guys should all use what you like. You should experiment and try a bunch of different things. And I will leave it at that.
Tyler, you're up.
Basically everything what Raleigh said. Also, if you're up really close and personal, the housing of your optic is a circle. So, and
Yes, it is.
I teach target reference to size of housing reference to size of target in my class as well, and help you understand the relationship between those, confirmation needed, and all that jazz. But everything Raleigh said.
Yeah, to Memphis's point about the training wheels, I found that to be especially true with me. The dot really helped the circle really helped when I was first started working with the dot. And then I was in a class and overheard the instructor providing some coaching to another student and was like, "Hey, switch it to the dot." So I did it, and I find the dot works better for me now, or I'm better with the dot now. So in my mind, I felt like the circle was training wheels for me to get there. And then the dot allows me to refine it a little bit better. I don't know, man. I'm a terrible shooter anyway, so don't listen to anything that I say. But I agree with the training wheels comment. Is all I wanted to say there. And then we have Kinetic talking about the ACSS Vulcan reticle in the chats. I don't have any experience with that, and I don't know if anybody does.
Call of Duty,
Yeah,
man.
I
That's the only place I know it.
I shot a whole match with it and would never buy one ever again. It is way too much information when you're moving around in a dynamic any way, shape, fashion, or form, and you're starting to see like parts of the outer ring. You're like, oh my God, which part of this thing should I be shooting with? And it just, my brain was like extremely irritated with it.
I mean, going back to what I said earlier, if you do 5 minutes of dry fire a day, every day, practicing draw and presentation, you're probably going to need a couple weeks to never need that ACSS Vulcan reticle to be training wheels anymore. If you actually just do the work, very small amount of work consistently over a period of time, it's amazing what it'll do for you.
Before we wrap up on the topic of dots, just one word answer. Or 2 words, 1 or 2 words. We're going to go around the horn. It's going to go Dan, Memphis, Riley, Tyler. Big optic, like the SRO or the 507, the Holosun, like the new one, the 507C. Is that the new one? Like
make a
big
comp.
window?
The big
Yeah.
one's the competition.
Yeah. Or little.
I thought we were going back to the olden days, 9 or 45.
Right? So Dan, big window or little window, or irrelevant? Big window.
Big window, little dot.
Memphis.
Big window, big dot.
Riley?
I like a big window and I like big dots.
All right. Tyler?
Big window, thin housing.
Yeah.
Man, I shot a staccato last weekend with the 507 comp on there, and I agree with you guys. Big window.
It's cheating, man.
It is cheating. It is such
mean-
a freaking cheater gun with a cheater optic.
Imagine this. Imagine this. At one point down the road in the future, like we'll just have like this heads-up display where like
Yes.
wherever you
Like
look,
pilots do.
the reticle appears, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of like the bigger and bigger the window gets, is kind of how it becomes, you know.
Mhm.
You know,
And it,
I want it to be like, you know, like Google Glass, where like my dot shows up in my glasses, and that's where my hole is going to be. That's where I want it.
You think Apple will work it into their Vision Pro goggles?
I hope not.
Until your social credits get so low that they just turn it off and you have no way of
Turn your
aiming
dial
anymore.
off.
Right.
It's because the E EMP.
That's right. When China invades, yeah.
Oh shit. Next week.
Yeah.
All right, Andy, do you rap, buddy?
Demonetized.
Ain't got no monetized to be demonetized. Yeah. So, guys, thanks for coming on. This was another good one. We'd like to schedule this again in the future. I think we have a pretty full schedule for the next month, but let's talk about getting you guys back on maybe May-ish or so, and we can continue this conversation. So, thank you, Dan, Memphis, Riley, and Tyler. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It was awesome. Great conversation again. I know Dan is a couple hours ahead of us and he has to get up in a few hours. So we're going to blame him for cutting it off at the hour and a half mark. Remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. Y'all stay safe and we'll see you next week.